Alright, you're good?
Yeah.
Alright, hello everyone, my name is Eric Ponder. I'm a senior in mechanical engineering. I'm here today to give you a 6-minute talk about spark ignition engines. So, just a little introduction. Spark ignition engines are very commonly used in our society today, for better and for worse. They're fueled by gasoline. They're characterized by using some type of combustion to produce some type of output work, which generally powers, cars, lawnmowers, things like that. Odds are you probably used a spark ignition engine to get here today, assuming you don't drive a diesel vehicle or use a bicycle or something. The key distinction between spark ignition engines and compression ignition engines is that spark ignitions use a spark plug, which is what initiates the combustion. And they can be categorized into 2-stroke and 4-stroke engines, which will be both discussed. So 2-stroke engines, you can see a general diagram of what we're going to be talking about on the left. Essentially, we have the piston, we have a crankshaft, which is the bottom circular bit, and the work is generated through combustion, which shoots the piston downwards and adds rotational energy into the crankshaft. So for 2 strokes, as implied by the name, there's 2 strokes for every cycle, and each cycle takes 1 rotation of the crankshaft. The first stroke is the upstroke, where the fuel-air mixture will come in to the piston. The crankshaft's movement will push the piston up, and then once it has compressed all the way, the spark plug will fire, which initiates a combustion and then shoots the piston back down. The shooting of the piston back down is actually the second stroke, and that's where the power is done, and that's how work is added into the crankshaft. So these are generally found on smaller applications like motorcycles, scooters, lawnmowers, things like that. Here's a PV diagram of what we're talking about with the 2-stroke engine. It's fairly simple, but if we start at 1, from 1 to 2 is the compression, where the piston moves upwards and compresses the air-fuel mixture. From 2 to 3 is where the ignition happens, which is why you see the pressure and the temperature rise. Then we will have the expansion after the combustion occurs, which is when the piston shoots back down and the volume increases, and then the exhaust and all of that, and that's how we end up back at 1. Next, we have 4-stroke engines, which are pretty similar to 2-stroke engines, except that it actually takes 2 rotations of the crankshaft to accomplish 1 cycle. So you can see using this image, stroke 1 is just the intake where the air-fuel mixture comes in. Stroke 2 is the compression. Stroke 3 is where the spark plug fires and the combustion occurs, and then stroke 4 is the exhaust. The key difference here is if you look at the position of the crankshaft, like in each of the strokes, you can see that it completes 2 full rotations again compared to on the previous slide. With the 2-stroke engine, it only completes 1 rotation. And these are commonly found in automobiles. Here's just a PV diagram of what we're talking about with the 4-stroke engine. The key difference here is that we have this extra line at the bottom of the screen from 1 to 2 and from 6 to 1. This is where the intake occurs and the exhaust occurs, because those are extra strokes rather than being embedded in the process of the 2-stroke engine. There's no work done through the intake and the exhaust, because if you do like the area under the curve for this scenario, the area from 1 to 2 is equivalent to the negative of the area from 6 to 1, so there's no actual work done. All the work occurs from 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 is kind of where the work happens. So now I'm just going to talk about a few different systems that all work together to allow this all to happen. First, if you'll take a look at the top right, you can kind of see on many engines there's multiple cylinders firing at once, and there's multiple cylinders working at once, but they all may fire at different times. So you can see the red bit is the crank web, and so you can see it's not just one straight shaft. The way the work is added is there's the little bits that go like up and down and things like that, to where the pistons can be at different positions at the same time. So one of the systems that I wanted to talk about was the camshaft, the rocker arm, the valves. This is essentially controlling the timing of the inlet and exhaust valves, so that way the engine is able to open the inlet at the right time to let gas in, open the exhaust at the right time to let gas out, and not mess up any of that. That's kind of the goal of that system. And then kind of like I described before, the other system that's working here is the piston, the crankshaft, and the crank web. The piston is what's controlling the compression of the gas and the available volume. The vertical height of the piston is controlled by the rotation of the crankshaft and thus the crank web. Because the piston is attached to the crank web, as the shaft rotates, that's where that's how the piston movement will go up and down based off of that. And this is kind of just a summary of what I just described. Thank you. Are there any questions?